I know you're scared, you wanna hide away sometimes. I know you heard from everyone telling you lies.
Hello everyone, my name is Allie, and this is going to be my first YouTube video where I just kind of sit down and tell stories. So if you guys follow me over on TikTok or you've read my books, you probably know all about this, but I kind of wanted to make some longer form videos as well over here on YouTube, especially since the future of TikTok we don't know about. So today I'm going to be getting ready, and you're going to be getting ready with me while I tell you about my haunted house that I grew up in. So I grew up in a semi-old home in Pensacola, Florida. And when you think about Pensacola, you normally think about the beach, but this house was not on the beach. This was about 30 minutes away from the beach in the more country rural area. So this house was built in the late 60s, so I have no idea why it was as haunted as it was. I tried to research this house many times, and I could never find any information. There were no recorded deaths or anything like that, so I was pretty much left in the dark as to why it was so haunted. And my first ever memory was of seeing a ghost in this house. Genuinely, my first memory, not just of this house, but ever, was of the first time I saw a ghost. So I remember it so vividly. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was still young enough to be sleeping in my parents' bedroom. And I just got this sense that I needed to look at the foot of the bed. And when I did, I saw this dark, shadowy figure that was really tall and skinny with very long arms, and it was pacing back and forth across the room. And at first, I thought that maybe someone was in our house, but then I realized it was disappearing and reappearing. So I would go on to see that shadow figure several other times, along with a few others. And we would also have, all of us in the house would have the standard haunted house experiences. So disembodied voices, really creepy dreams, and things like that. So one of the instances that I can think about that is probably the craziest in that house was the ghost of Carly. Now, I have had a lot of dreams that I believe to be spiritual dreams, but I think this was probably the first. So I would have these dreams when I was younger that I would wake up in the middle of the night and there would be this girl in a red dress standing next to my bed. And she would tell me that her name was Carly and she wanted me to go play with her. So I would get up, and when I would look behind myself, I would see my body still laying in the bed. And that was weird to me at that age, but it didn't really scare me because I was too young to really realize that that's like some Insidious shit. I had not seen Insidious at that point, but that's what it reminded me of. Like growing up, that's what it reminded me of. So anyway, she would lead me to the crawl space beside my house. Now, this crawl space was really creepy. We had no idea what was in it. We had never really been under there before. It was just falling apart and creepy. There was fiberglass, all that stuff. So she led me to the crawl space, and when she would open the door, she would tell me to get in. And I would become overcome with this horrifying feeling that if I went in, something terrible would happen. So I would tell her no. Now, she didn't like that. So when I would tell her no, she would start really trying to push me to go in. And I'd just be like, no, no, no. And she would start screaming, this like ear-piercing scream. And she would start crying, and the tears were really shiny, and it just was very abnormal. And I would wake up absolutely terrified. So, don't know what that was about. But the reason that I know for a fact that it was paranormal, some of it you'll have to read about in my book, because there were other things too that pointed to the fact that it was definitely paranormal and not just a dream. But the main thing was the fact that I moved away for about a year with my parents and my little brother. And it was due to my father's job. and we were going to come back in about a year, right? So my older brother and sister-in-law moved into our house while we were gone, and they knew that the house was haunted, but I don't think they knew specifically about the dreams that I had about Carly. So this one day, my brother's wife texted me while I was gone and no longer living in that house. And she says, "You said this house was haunted, right?" I was like, "Yes, what happened?" And she told me that she had a dream that she woke up and there was a little girl in a red dress standing beside her bed. And she turned over and looked behind herself and saw her own body laying in the bed. So this little girl asked to go play with her, and she said no. And the little girl started screaming and crying, this ear-piercing scream, until she woke up. Literally the exact same dream that I had. I never told her the details of the dream, but she had the exact same dream. So Carly was definitely real. There was also what I used to call the white thing. So the first time I saw the white thing, I woke up in the middle of the night in my own room, which I barely ever slept in my own room the entire time I lived in that house. I usually had my brother sleep in my room in a sleeping bag, or I would go in his room in a sleeping bag, or I would sleep on the couch. But this one night I was sleeping on my own, and I heard this very strange noise in my room. It sounded like someone was just throwing stuff around the room, and I was like, nope. And I went to go sleep in my brother's room, and he was still young, and his crib was still in the room from when he was a baby, but he was no longer a baby. He slept in his own bed. So he was sleeping in his bed, and I decided to go in there and just crawl into the crib. So I crawled up into the crib, and I was back in there trying to go back to sleep, right? And all of a sudden, the door opens, and I look over, and I see something white dash across the floor. Now, I had a lot of dogs, so I thought this was probably one of my dogs, so I didn't think too much of it. But then, something tried to jump into the crib and climb in. And this thing was not human, or animal, or anything I've ever seen before. So, what it looked like was it was huge and glowing white. And its head, it had, shoulders about the same length as a human being's, but its head went all the way around like this. So it didn't have a neck. It just had this gigantic head, right? And it looked almost two-dimensional, which is really hard to explain, but basically it looked flat. It looked like something that somebody had drawn. Nothing I've ever seen before. So it had its arms raised up like this. And its arms, there was no wrist. It just blended into these 3 really long, really sharp claws. And it tried to scramble into the bed, and then it fell off. And from that point forward, I didn't see it again that night. But it terrified me, right? So not too long later, my little brother is an artist. He's a great artist. And he started at a very young age, right? So around that time. And, a little after that time, because he was a bit young when I first saw it. But, he was drawing in a sketchbook, and it looked exactly like what I had seen that night. And I was like, "Hey, what is this that you're drawing?" And he said, "The Bunny Man." At that point, some things started to click, because a month or so prior to that, he had run into my room when I was sleeping by myself again, screaming and crying, because he had gotten up to get water or something, and he had seen a big bunny man that chased him. So basically, the big bunny man was this white thing that I had seen. And something later confirmed that even more. So another night, again, while I was sleeping on my own, I'm starting to realize there might have been a pattern there. So another night that I saw the big bunny man, I was sleeping in my room, and my dog started crying at the door. And I thought that meant she had to go to the bathroom. So I opened the door to my bedroom to let her out into the hallway so I could go let her out. Well, I opened the door, and crouched like this is the white thing / bunny man. And it was crouched like it was about to spring up, and its hands were like this, which whenever someone is imitating a bunny rabbit, they usually go like this. So that's probably why he called it the bunny man. So as you can imagine, I slammed my door shut. And when I did, something shook the door and pounded on it. So that was the last that I ever saw of the bunny man. Thank God. So one night when I was about 11, I saw something almost equally as scary. I was on the computer late at night in the living room and just browsing through YouTube or whatever else I used to do back then. And I heard stomping in the hallway. Now, in our hallway, you could hear what went on in the hallway from our living room, but you couldn't see. And also, the doors to all of our bedrooms, which we always slept with our doors closed, all of us. And they made really loud noises when you tried to open them. They'd be like it's hard to explain, but they made very loud noises when you would open them. So you couldn't really open them without somebody knowing, right? So I heard somebody stomping, and I had not heard that door open. So I was like, what the heck? And the stomping sounded really exaggerated. So it sounded like somebody trying to scare you. So it wasn't just somebody walking down the hallway. It was like, doo, doo, doo. And I was just like, okay. So I kind of just sat there staring at my computer. Kind of too afraid to look over, honestly, even though like I couldn't see, but I knew that it was coming toward the area where I could see, if that makes sense. So the hallway would spill out, it would go this way, and then it would spill out into the living room, right where I was sitting, because that's where the computer desk was. So I was like, oh boy, someone or something is about to come out into here. And it's gonna be scary. I just knew it deep down. This is what happens when I try to put on eyeliner while I'm talking, so I'm about to redo this. Alright, well, sisters, not twins. So I'm sitting there, and I just hear these stomping noises, and I'm just waiting for the horror, basically. And I was right. Out of the corner of my eye, right where the hallway would empty out into the living room, I see this figure step out. And it was a tall, hooded figure. So think the Nazgul from Lord of the Rings, if you've seen those movies. They're tall with big cloaks, big black cloaks, and no face, so blackness, like no face, no eyes, no mouth, nothing, just dark. Like a void, right? So I turn around and nothing is there. And I'm just like, oh my God. So while I am starting to come to terms with the fact that I just saw something that disappeared, something horrifying that disappeared, I hear my name whispered in my ear. At that point, I screamed, started crying, and had a full-blown panic attack. So that was about the only thing that happened with that particular figure, but that leads me into the disembodied voices. So we would hear disembodied voices all the time. It wasn't just me, everyone in my family heard them. So one in particular was my mother and I were home alone, and in the next room, we heard a little girl yelling, "Mom?" And that goes back to Carly. So that's who we think that was. And we both heard that at the same time. So, you know, a lot of the time you can blame it on hallucinations or hearing things. I don't think that's what that was, because we both heard that. So when you both start hearing something, you know it's real. So we also would all hear whispering from time to time. That was probably the most common. But one time when my brother and his wife were living in that house, my brother's wife was home by herself. And in the next room, which used to be my room, their dog was barking nonstop, just barking, barking, barking. And all of a sudden, she heard a man's voice loudly yell, "Shut up!" The dog shut up. Nobody else was home. We had neighbors, but the neighbors were pretty far from us because we lived out in like the country area. So our yard was huge. So their houses were not right next to ours. And you can tell the difference between someone yelling across the yard to yelling directly in your house. And that was directly in the house. There was also poltergeist activity. So doors would open, they would slam, things like that. Some things were thrown at me on a handful of times. My older brother witnessed a bottle of lotion levitating in the air. Literally levitating in the air. So that happened. One time, my mother and I were hanging out. I was just sitting so there was like a little breakfast nook over by the kitchen. I was sitting in the breakfast nook, and all of a sudden, one of the cabinets just opened, and then the toaster went, like it popped up, like it does when it has toast or something in it. Nobody had put anything in it. And the thing on that toaster that you have to push down to make it heat up, was pretty hard to push down. It's not something that would just fall down or you could accidentally knock down. You have to actively push it down, right? And nothing was in it, but the surface was hot. So somebody had pushed it down. And it happened to pop up right at the same time that a cabinet opened. So that was spooky. But overall, probably the main thing that we would experience in the house, the main thing were the feelings, the sensations of being watched, or just overall uncomfortable feelings. So the bathroom was probably the worst. Every time I used the bathroom, I would run. I would leave. The second I was done, I would not even wash my hands in there. I would wash my hands in the sink, in the kitchen, because I got the sensation that I was being chased. So that was terrifying. We all had that feeling at some point. I don't know if we all had it in the bathroom. I certainly did. But we all had that feeling that somebody was watching us, and it was not like a good watching. It wasn't like watching over you. It was like staring at you angrily. So one time my father was out in the garage, and he got that same feeling, except he felt like something was rushing up on him. And he ran into the house. And that dude never ran, really. So he ran into the house, knocked shit over. I think he actually hurt himself because he ran into the house and slammed that door so intensely behind him. So yeah, to this day, I have no idea why that house was so haunted. But I do have a feeling it had to do with my crawl space. And that I go into a bit more in my books. So if you want to go ahead and read my books, my first one is called Ghost Girl, a memoir of my childhood paranormal experiences. And that is the first one where I mostly talk about my house, my childhood, growing up in that house, how I started ghost hunting, and all of that. Then I have my next book, which is called The Door is Open. And that goes into my experiences as an adult, so my more professional ghost hunting experiences and my experiences in Appalachia after I've moved, which I can get on here and tell you guys some of those stories as well. That being said, I hope you have a great day and try not to get haunted by any ghosts.